to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Well, good morning, afternoon. So the last couple weeks we have been talking about a topic that's kind of heavy, and why not do 3 weeks on the heavy topic? No. But for real, it has been a heavy topic. So in the last couple of weeks, we've covered why people in positions of power can abuse children, who kind of becomes abusers, what the grooming process looks like. And I'll admit, I knew that the episodes were going to be heavy, but recording them felt heavier than I think even we expected. And even triggering for you, I would say.
Okay. I don't usually use that word.
I know you don't like the word,
everyone
but
says things trigger them. So
I think if it was like, if we're actually using triggering in the correct way, that was probably a good explanation, though I know you don't like it. But it just brought up emotions. It evoked emotions.
Right.
And I think it would do so for anyone, because when you talk about people who abuse children, of course, it's going to bring up your own fears, your own emotions. But I think we tried to leave it on a hopeful piece where we said that we're teaching this information because we want to educate people and we want people to understand how abusers work, why abuse happens, so that we can protect our kids. But specifically in this episode, we wanted to get into more specifics on how we can actually protect our kids, things we can say, things we can do. And so this one's going to be a lot more practical, and Scott has some really good questions lined up. We've done a lot of research just in the most effective ways to teach our kids about body safety and protect them. And that's, I think we can all agree on what we all want for our kids.
Agreed. In the first part of this series, you talked about most of the time abusers are known to the child that gets abused. So is that something you would tell your child? Or are you terrifying them by asking that or saying that to them?
I definitely wouldn't go out and be like to my kid, okay, just so you know, 90% of people who abuse kids are known to them. So, watch out for any of our friends, you know, like I think sometimes parents do that. I was laughing, thinking back to when my parents, and they actually did a really good job of teaching body safety, especially at a time where we weren't really talking about body safety in the same way we were now. But I remember them saying that, and then saying, sometimes it can be people that are mean to kids or whatever. And then they named a few of their friends, you never know, it could be this person, it could be this person. And they didn't mean it in terms of it is this person, right?
Yeah.
But I think
I can see as a kid, you would take that as, I don't trust that person anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So don't go naming well, it could be our friend this, it could be Uncle so-and-so. As soon as you start that, then it plants the idea in the kid's head of okay, so definitely not that person. Because kids are very black and white and they can't necessarily understand the gray area.
Yeah.
So instead of doing that or coming at kids and being likely if you're going to be abused, it's someone you know, I would talk about things that safe people do versus things that maybe are tricky behavior that you would want them to tell you about. So I kind of think of trusted behavior versus tricky behavior more than just saying don't trust these people. So for example, trusted people listen to you when you say no. Trusted people, if you ask for your parent or you say you want to tell your parent something, they say, go ahead. Yeah, of course, tell your parent anything you want to say. Trusted people don't ask you to keep secrets from your parents. But some tricky, or even you could call it strange if you wanted to, behavior would be, this person always wants to be alone with you. This person tickles you when nobody else is around. This person is always asking you to keep secrets from us. Those are things that are tricky. And if anyone does those things, I just want you to tell us. It doesn't even mean that that person's trying to be bad or make you feel unsafe, but I just want you to know that you can always come to me with any of those things. So that's a way that we're teaching our child about behavior to look out for versus just don't trust anyone. And, especially, it could be this person or it could be this type of person, right? That can definitely lead to fear in kids. And we want to avoid doing that.
Yeah, I could easily see that. They would take that. Even our girls, I could see us just naming a friend as an example. It could be this person. And all of a sudden they never want to be with that person ever again.
100%, because they can't get that nuance. So you have to be a lot more direct with the kids, right? When you teach them strange behavior or tricky behavior, whatever you want to call it, what you're doing is you're equipping them for all people. So it's not necessarily just people they know or just strangers. We had talked about in previous episodes, the traditional way of teaching body safety was don't go in a van with a man who's offering you candy.
Right. We talked about
Right?
that in this series.
Yeah.
Stranger danger, and you recommended not necessarily using that language. That's how we were taught, but most of the time it's people we know. So
Right. But so instead of even saying it's going to be a stranger or it's someone we know, we're just teaching about the types of behavior that's not okay. Right. And it's not okay for anyone to try and like lure a child to a van to give them candy and like take them away from the big group or their parents or whatever. So we're just talking about the behavior.
right. But I feel like that's also not really a realistic behavior that you're going to see.
Yeah, exactly.
So my question, I guess, now is how do parents even know what behaviors to actually teach are tricky versus not tricky?
Yeah.
I feel like if it's one of those situations of you don't know what you don't know, and therefore you can't just come up with all these actual examples of real things that people will do unless you have that information in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we talk about this a lot in our body safety course that we have, but some of the things, so we go back to the 2 episodes we just did on grooming, and we talked about some typical things that people who are trying to groom or abuse children do, right? So they'll ask them to keep secrets. So one of the things that parents can teach their kids about is if anyone tries to ask you to keep a secret and says, don't tell me, even if it's something really little, I want you to tell me right away. Other grown-ups shouldn't be asking kids to keep secrets from their parents.
How do you get kids to actually tell you secrets? I feel like at times, like our girls are pretty good with that at this point, but at times, for whatever reason, they just don't really want to tell us about their days, or they don't want to really tell us their experiences, which I get to a point, like you don't want to explain it. Or we had one situation with our oldest on the bus that was something she didn't tell us for a little while. Not a long time, but long enough where we felt like, oh, she was actually kind of keeping it from us. But we have a very good relationship with her, and one that not too long after something occurred, she came to us right away. But I don't think all kids are like that. Well, they'll feel that comfortable with their parents. So how do you actually get them to talk, to tell you things? What you're saying, it's easy to say, well, you always have to come to me. It's not right that someone tells you have to keep a secret from your parents. Meanwhile, I feel like kids will still not tell their parents regardless.
So it's 2 things, and you're kind of jumping to a further point, which I think is the most important point in the whole body safety conversation, right? Which is we can teach them these things. For example, grown-ups shouldn't ask kids to keep secrets from their parents, right? It's important to teach and be direct because we said kids don't really get the nuance. And the relationship that we have with our children that we're building, not just in the body safety conversations, but the way that we respect our child's no, right? So when our child says like no hugs, no kisses, we're not forcing that on them. We are asking our child about their day, and we're genuinely telling them, I want to know. Like, I want to hear about the tricky parts of your day. And we're doing that routinely. Like maybe you're doing that every night at dinner. I know that's what we're trying to do, right? Every night at dinner, we'll ask our kids questions like, oh, what was the hardest part of today? Is there anything tricky that happened that you want to tell us about? It's in the quiet bedtime moments. So you're putting...
Let's say at dinner, they're never telling us those kinds of things. It's like minor.
Actually, that's when our daughter first told me about what was going on the bus. And then we followed up with her again at bedtime.
Was that at dinner? I thought it was at bedtime.
You weren't home that night at dinner. And then she started telling me at dinner because I was asking her that question. But bedtime's another good time. I find car rides are really, like you have a lot of success, I find, in the car with our kids. And car rides are nice, especially for those kids. Sometimes they have a hard time if you're just like face to face, like, tell me everything, right? But that gives a little bit more of a barrier. You're looking at the road. You're not making direct eye contact. So for those kids who are a little harder to actually tell you what they're feeling, I find a car ride is a nice opportunity. Or when you're doing something else. So you could be coloring together. You could be doing Lego or a puzzle or something like that. But having those tiny moments where you're trying to connect with your child and like ask them about their life, telling them stories about your life. So sometimes if you think, oh, maybe something's going on with my kid, I just like don't know. Like I feel like there's something they're not telling me. You could tell them a story of when you were a child and there was something you didn't tell your parents because you were worried they'd have a big reaction or something like that. So it's in those moments where you're nurturing the relationship, you're genuinely showing your child like, hey, I want to know. Like, I want to be a part of your life. I care. Those are the moments when your child's going to start to begin to feel safe enough to open up to you. And for some kids who are a bit more reserved or shy, and a lot of the time they're really worried about their parents' reaction. So they might not want to say something that happened at school or on the bus because they're worried their parents going to like blow up and call the school or whatever. In those moments, we need to help our kids feel safe enough that they can tell us and know that we're on their team and we want to support them. And that's, I think, where the biggest work of body safety is done. Because even within that, creating that safe relationship, you are showing your child how they deserve to be treated. And a lot of the time, children will realize what's happening is making me uncomfortable or doesn't feel right or isn't safe. And that's not how I'm treated at home. And even within that relationship, that's teaching them what kind of behavior they should expect to tolerate from others.
So it's more about building that attachment, and then that will come from that. Yeah, and you made a point on parents' reaction, kids sometimes being nervous about that. I do think that is a big thing. Because some parents will make any little fall, any little thing that happens, it's very dramatic. And I feel like things get kind of blown out of proportion a bit in certain reactions that parents can make. So then I could see how they might be worried to actually have a conversation about things if something minor like getting a scrape all of a sudden is a huge deal.
Yeah. Or if they know their parent has like this strong sense of justice, or they already don't like the teacher, they already have this feeling, right? And I think even for our daughter, part of whatever happened with her, she said was like, oh, I just didn't want to like make a big deal out of it. And I knew it would have to, and I knew you'd have to call the school, and I knew this was going to have to happen, right? And so that is nerve-wracking for a child too. And I think it can be easy, especially if something really bad did happen, that the parent just like flies off the handle and starts calling the other people and whatever. But we have to remember in the moment, we first need to really hear our child out and try and be calm for them if we want them to keep telling us things, even though inside our bodies we might be screaming and ready to like go strangle someone. Because otherwise, if they're always worried we're going to fly off the handle, they're going to be like, what would I rather deal with, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, we talked about obedience and not teaching your child to be blindly obedient to authority, which, let's be real, in what we grew up with, that was sort of what was taught. And I mean, I personally have always pushed back against that just because of many reasons, some of which we discussed a little bit earlier. And I didn't trust adults knew much better than I did. So then to just be blindly obedient to them, I wasn't one of those. But you've also talked about kids should not be that way. You shouldn't teach your kids to be that way. So, I mean, I feel like it's self-evident, but how does teaching your child to be just obedient put them at risk to these kinds of issues?
Yeah, like you said, when you really think about it logically, it's kind of self-explanatory. Like if you're teaching your child, okay, if someone in a position of authority like your teacher or myself as your parent or your grandmother or whatever, if they say something, you have to listen straight away, no matter what, because you respect them because they're older than you. It teaches them to kind of turn off their own internal voice in those situations that might say, like, I don't know about that, or why do I have to do that? And it turns off that pushback and makes them just be like, okay, I just have to do whatever. And it goes back to that conversation we had. I think it was one of the previous 2 episodes where we were talking about authenticity versus belonging or versus attachment, right? And children will always choose to be attached and to be close with the people that they love. And so in these situations, if we have taught our child, in order to be close with and be in good relationship with me, you must be obedient and listen no matter what. It's also saying you must turn off your authentic reaction to whatever it is that I'm telling you to do. And so sometimes, sure, that works, especially when you're like to your child, don't run to the road. You know, you need to be obedient and not run to the road. And I think for most part, parents who are trying to teach this to their kids, like obedience, they're trying to do it in those situations to keep their child safe. But again, children don't have that gray area. They don't have that nuance yet in their head. And so what's the difference between listening to someone who tells me not to run to the road or listening to someone who's telling me to do something that otherwise I would feel uncomfortable about or unsafe? And also, what's the difference if my parents say, I have to listen to everyone who's in a position of authority, but this person in the position of authority is asking me to do something that's kind of odd, but I have to listen to them, right? So it can be priming a child to be more vulnerable to abuse or more vulnerable to just doing whatever anyone tells them to do without pushing back.
How do you deal with that? The gray area, though, because that's the reality, right? Like sometimes our kids just need to listen to us. Like if they're running to the road and we say stop, you can't really have them questioning your authority at that point.
Yeah.
But in other situations, you might be okay with them questioning authority and not being blindly obedient right away.
Hey friends, so at pickup last week, our daughter asked Scott a truly kind of tricky question in front of her younger siblings. Scott was telling me that when he heard a question like this, he used to panic, but this time he had a plan. And he said to our daughter, thank you for asking. Let's talk tonight when we've got privacy. And that's a line that he learned straight from our new body safety and consent course at Nurture First. So this new body safety and consent course is taught by me. So Jess, if you listen to this podcast, you know me. I'm a child therapist and a mom of 3, and I have taught body safety and consent education for years. This course takes all my years of experience teaching this education and gives you calm, age-appropriate language for body parts, consent, and boundaries. You'll learn how to teach your kids that no means no. You'll learn how to teach them to read facial cues. You'll talk about safe and unsafe touch, and you'll even teach them about their uh-oh feeling. There's guidance inside this course for the real life stuff, like tickling that goes too far, and even the difference between a secret and a surprise. We made this course at Nurture First because research shows that body safety education helps kids speak up sooner, and we want that for our family, for Scott and I, but also for you. So check the course out at nurturedfirst.com/bodysafety, and to save 10%, use the code ROBOTUNICORN. And just full disclosure here, we are the creators of this course, and we're so proud of it.
How do you make sure your child knows when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate to be pushing back? Even if they don't love their teacher, they still sometimes have to just listen to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. That's actually a really good question, because you're right. Sometimes you do have to sit in class and just do the math homework, even though you don't want to. But then other times, maybe your teacher is making a comment, or like I remember you talking about your school experiences. Maybe they're being unfair to another student, or they're saying something that doesn't really make sense or something like that. And we actually want our kids to like push back a little bit and say, hey, I don't know about that. Right. And there's that balance. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the coaching that's done at home. Right. And even, again, back to like those things that we were talking about, like teaching your child about what is the tricky behavior, that type of thing, so that they can flag it and be like, this isn't okay, versus teaching your child, yeah, sometimes you're going to have to do subjects in school that you don't like to, right? That's different than your teacher tickling you. Yeah, exactly. I actually have a game in the body safety toolkit that is all about this, and it's called Stop, Go, Maybe. And it just gives you all sorts of different scenarios, and you could play a game like that with your child. And it's like different people, right? So like your teacher says you have to do your homework in class, or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, I don't like it, but it's not a stop situation, right? Like that's safe, it's a go. But then your teacher asked you to go in the bathroom stall with them and tickles you. Okay, well, that's like a no, right? And so I think you could even go over different scenarios, situations like that with your child. You can make them funny so that your child can learn the difference between something that's like actually unsafe versus something that's like, I just don't feel like doing that, but I have to.
Yeah.
I think that's where you were going with that. That makes a lot of sense to me. And that's like really our job as parents is like, we do a lot of coaching. Like even I knew we had to do a lot of coaching as parents, but I feel like I was still surprised by the amount of like, okay.
Yeah, it's daily.
It's daily. Like whether it's body safety coaching or friendship coaching or whatever, like we have to do a lot of like walking our child through how do you respond in this situation. But I do like that stop, maybe go game. I think it's kind of a fun thing that you can just do with your child, give them a whole bunch of scenarios, and it shows them if they're really understanding the body safety or if they're just kind of like, I don't know, if they don't get it at all.
Right. Okay. That's fair enough. Okay. I feel like we have covered a whole bunch of ways in this episode, plus the other ones of what to do to protect our kids. I mean, I think the first step, like we've talked about, is understanding the stages and like what makes someone even do this to children. That way our guard as parents can be up and we can start teaching our kids, what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior that they can expect from adults. So we've kind of covered this in the other 2 episodes, but how do we actually trust anyone with our kids after we've talked about all this? Where do we even start?
Yeah, I think we were talking about that before. And I know, especially for people who have had previous traumas, like trusting is really hard, especially when you cover all this. You're like, okay, well, maybe I'll just bubble wrap my kids forever and never let them anywhere. But I think it's about understanding we as parents now also know what the red flags are. We are openly talking to our children about body safety, right? All of these things help protect them. And I think, how do you trust someone? It's the same as like, how do you trust your partner? How do you trust your friend? Like slowly building that trust in small moments over time, right? And so I don't necessarily trust someone to take my kid for the day that I've never spent quality time with, that I don't know. That's just a random parent from the school, right? It's about building those relationships ourselves as adults. And then also understanding our child, how much they understand, how empowered they are to call us or reach out to us or tell us what's going on. And being really attuned with them and what they can handle as well. And then slowly, like a play date even, right? Like the first play date I think that we sent our child on was a friend that we had for many, many years. And we've had like countless interactions with them over time. And then they take her for a play date with her friend who's like been her friend since they were 2 years old together.
Yeah.
So you feel comfortable with that. And it's like slowly building over time and watching out for red flags at the same time. But there's no like one answer of like, this is when you can trust someone, right? It's really knowing your child. So here's a few other ways that we can start to build trust, or we can start the process of trusting someone with our kids. So the first thing is just having that open, ongoing communication about body safety rules. I think for us with our kids, like we talk about that pretty often with our kids. Body safety. Even let's say we're on the way to a play date or something like that. We might just like remind them of a few things, or we're on the way to like a family gathering, right?
Yep.
And I always like to do like a post play date check-in. So like, who was there today? What happened? You know, what was the best part of your play date? Was there anything tricky that happened that you want to talk about? It's like having that communication, I think, is really helpful. Paying attention to your child too. So if you are, you know, you're sending them on more play dates, or they're going to team practices for the first time or whatever, notice if there's ever any big changes in your child's behavior. Like, were they really outgoing and now all of a sudden they're really quiet and, you know, retreating to their room, or they're super moody all of the time. Another big red flag to me is like if we're seeing sexualized play in any way from a child, that's just usually a sign, okay, I want to tune in with this. Like, why is this happening? And so whether that's like abuse or they've seen something that they shouldn't have seen online, often it will come out in play. And just any kind of big changes in your child, especially if you've started to trust someone, or they started to sport, or they started going to school, or whatever that is. Again, trusting your instincts as a parent, and really, if you really feel like something's off, you know, getting curious about that. It's like what we talked about, I think, in the previous episodes as well, where there's so many people were like, oh, I had a funny feeling about that person or whatever, but I never said anything, right? So getting curious when you have that instinct in yourself, I think, is really important. And knowing who your trusted people are. And I know that's tough even as a parent, like we've talked about that, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you even like really ever know someone? I feel like we did 2 episodes on that like last winter.
Yeah.
But I know that, like, let's say we have our trusted people, like a trusted group, my parents, you know, aunt and uncle, whatever, who we would feel safe with our kids being with. And I think even saying that to your child, like, who are your trusted people? And if you don't feel like you can tell us something, you can talk to these people as well. I think that can be helpful too.
Okay. I think that's a good place to end this then.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of tangible things without too much
Overwhelming.
where we're like overwhelming you. All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we look forward to covering a new topic next week, and we will talk to you all again soon. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.